Spirituality, at its core, is one of the most profound expressions of the human experience. It springs from the search for meaning, the yearning for something that transcends the visible, and the need for belonging amidst the chaos of existence. However, in a world increasingly mediated by cameras and live broadcasts, faith has coexisted with improvised stages where the sacred blends with spectacle, raising crucial questions about the limits of spiritual authority and the fine line between religiosity and manipulation. The complexity of offerings and vows in religious contexts. Recently, the discussion around fundraising in religious environments has gained prominence. The practice of asking for offerings or vows is ancient and, for many, it's an act of faith and voluntary contribution for the maintenance of religious activities and social projects. However, the transparency and voluntariness of these actions are frequently questioned. The validity of requesting an offering of $10,000, for example, doesn't lie in the amount itself, but in how this request is presented and perceived. If it's a voluntary offering, without any coercion or pressure, and intended for a clear purpose, such as aiding a social project, it aligns with the principles of donation. The issue arises when the line between a request and a demand blurs, or when financial contribution is tied to promises of blessings or divine retribution. Social media amplifies this discussion. A PIC's request for a social project, even if the intention is noble and the destination of the money is explicitly stated repeatedly, can be easily decontextualized and interpreted as exploitation of faith, especially if the recording is edited to remove the explanations. We live in an era where perception often outweighs intention, and the responsibility to clearly communicate the purpose of donations falls on those who request them. The phenomenon of charisma and the fragility of discernment, faith, by touching such deep layers of the human psyche, proves vulnerable, especially when not accompanied by discernment. Since ancient times, philosophers, sociologists, and psychologists have observed how spirituality, when lived uncritically, can be shaped, redirected, and even instrumentalized. In contexts where the sacred is treated as incontestable, believers often surrender not only their devotion, but their very capacity for judgment. The problem isn't in faith itself, but in the suspension of doubt. It's at this point that fertile ground for manipulation is established. When believing becomes more important than understanding, and questioning is seen as a threat to spirituality, the figure of the religious leader, however improbable, can assume the role of an absolute guide. Charisma plays a central role in constructing religious authority. It's not just about eloquence or stage presence, but a specific form of symbolic power, which relies on the perception that the charismatic individual possesses exceptional qualities, a mission, or a gift that distinguishes them from others. When this perception is established, age, education level, or even the coherence of the discourse matter little. What counts is the feeling the individual evokes. The figure of a child prophet, for instance, evokes empathy, tenderness, and an idea of purity that, paradoxically, can shield their actions from direct criticism. Modern charismatic authority, driven by image and emotion, doesn't demand rational proof. It only requires a convincing performance. What we see today on social media and media temples is a reactualization of an ancestral pattern, now fueled by algorithms, likes, and shares. Faith in the age of spectacle, from intimate experience to public performance. In an increasingly connected world, faith has ceased to be merely an intimate or communal experience to also become a public spectacle. The boundary between spirituality and entertainment blurs even further when religious practices are shaped to generate audience, engagement, and at times financial return. When the sacred enters the digital stage, it's inevitable that discourse, gesture, and emotion are adapted to the rhythm of performance. What should be an authentic expression of the transcendental ends up transforming into a consumable product, packaged in live broadcasts, impactful phrases, and emotional choreographies. This theatralization of religion is not an isolated phenomenon. Scholars have already pointed to the society of the spectacle, where everything, including the sacred, can be converted into image and symbolic circulation. Faith, in this scenario, is instrumentalized not only by those who practice it, but also by those who consume it. The problem isn't in using technology as a means of transmitting beliefs, but in reducing spirituality to a repetitive performance, where the value of the message is measured by the number of applause or donations received, and when the agent of this performance is a child. The ethical risk intensifies, not only due to direct exploitation, but by reinforcing a model where pure emotion and not reflection becomes the main criterion for spiritual validation. This leads us to the crucial question: are we truly seeking the divine, or are we merely getting emotional about it? Critical reflection on how we relate to the sacred, how we are affected by figures of authority, and how we sometimes fail to question what is presented to us as divine becomes essential to preserve the integrity of faith in times of constant spectacularization.